It's July 17th, 2024. I'm with segment 2 with John Jeckovich reading his book, Their Mother's Sons, chapter 10, titled Church Service and the Bulge, and we're on page 270. At this time we thought there was something amiss about our status in the field. That was why we were shunted from one division to another. We were mostly in defensive positions, which entailed much digging in frozen ground and cold sleepless nights in log-covered bunkers, with only some straw or twigs to keep us off the ground. We all sensed that something big was taking place, but our inexperience limited to our scope of perception and just how gigantic the scale and magnitude of the new German offensive was. By morning of the 18th of December, there was more than 50 German columns probing the Ardennes and the Anschluss to Monschau.
What are columns, John?
Huh?
What are columns? Read that.
50 German columns. How many is that?
Columns?
Yeah.
It could be 300, 400.
In each column?
Huh?
In each column?
A relief column?
In each column, it said 50 German columns. So how many men would that be with 50 German columns?
Probably 300, 400 men.
Okay. Some had only 1.5 miles pierced as far as, and others as 10 to 12 miles. And one had raced 30 miles. It was here in the Schnee-Eifel sector that Germany had surrounded the 106th Division in their march to St. Vith. We got our first glimpse of German tanks, camouflage white, followed by packs of white sheep infantrymen.
Snow.
We were still in ODs, which could be seen for miles in a snow-covered terrain.
Tell me what ODs are.
What's ODs?
OD?
Yeah.
All Drab.
Okay. Which could be seen for miles in a snow-covered terrain. Most of our trucks were still the traditional olive drab, and the only thing our infantry did not make themselves more inconspicuous in the snow was to find out white bed sheets from the nearby farmhouse, and we used those for camouflage over their ODs. Our squad resorted to the same procedure. We would cut a hole in the center of a sheet and then slip it over our heads as a cape, and would tie it around our waist with some rope or string. There were rumors circulating that 6 companies had run out of bazooka shells and were down to filling wine bottles with gasoline and stuffing in a cloth wicks. As German tanks would come near the outpost, they would light their Molotov cocktail and throw it at the tank.
What, Dave?
They were running out of ammo, but so they make Molotov cocktails and throw it at the tank. There were also rumors of officers, not from our company, going from house to house and rooting terrified GIs out of cellars and putting them in doorways, threatening to shoot them if they did not leave the post, if they left their post. As Germans continued to drive towards Antwerp, the port it would afford them, the Allied command was rushing reinforcements to contain them. The 82nd Airborne Division was racing from France, and the 9th and 30th Divisions were coming from the north. We were in the middle immediate area, but it seemed like we're always relieving some outfit standing at outpost at some remote sector where there's not much going on. A definite pattern as the strategy of the German offensive was beginning to form, but no one on the Allied side could see it. with telephone lines knocked out and radios jammed. The battle was being fought on the squad, platoon, and company levels. The whole process of communication had been short-circuited. By noon, 18th December, the battle for St. Vith was in full swing, and G Company had caught some of the action, and there were severe casualties. We were plodding through the snow, wondering why we're always moving and not staying in one spot long enough to tangle with the enemy, which meant that if we didn't meet opposition, we were to assess and evaluate the situation and take it slow and easy, and not to jump in and attack. Shock actions was the commanders wanted to avoid due to the shortage of troops and supplies needed to contain the superior German force of tanks and infantry. The Allies needed to build their supply network and build up troops.
40,000 men they lost there, boy.
Yeah.
I went through all that shit to come out.
We were the cushion to absorb the initial onslaught, contain them where they were able to move away if they overpowered us. The prime concern at this early stage was to conserve manpower and hold it as possible until our buildup was completed. Naturally, none of us understood the strategy, and none of us could conceive the tremendous part we were playing in the earliest stages of the great battle. Later that afternoon, firing could be heard to the southwest, and a lieutenant from a tanker outfit went out to the road to see what's happening. He promptly returned and ordered us back into the woods. It's too dangerous to move out on the road in daylight. He told us to stay in the woods, out of sight, until it was dark. Leip was carrying a tripod, and I had the receiver, which was leaking antifreeze onto my hand. We sat the gun on its tripod and tried to stop the leaking at the petcock. The rest of the squad drew closer, and Finke cautioned them to spread out and form a screening perimeter for our own security. The lieutenant returned and informed Finke that his tanks were going to backtrack along the trail in the woods and see if they can enclose our firing up ahead of the different direction. He also told Finke again to stay put into the dark and then sent out a scout reconnector to the area ahead. The woods were crawling with German snipers and patrols. He cautioned as he left to join his tank command. Finke and I decided that our present position was not too safe, especially after all the tanks pulled out.
21.
What would we do with the tankers had gone? Backtrack while still staying in the woods for the concealment and afford and attempted to hook up with another outfit. Finke went out to scout ahead, and we would follow as quietly as possible. It was almost dark now, and there were long shadows forming all about in the deep woods. The trees were laying down, and the heavy snow, and it was a beautiful sight to witness under more favorable circumstances. Just then, a single shot rang out, and everyone hit the snow-covered ground and began to build up firing line in a semicircle. Then there was silence, and I immediately thought of Finke. He was in the vicinity of where the shot was heard. I told the squad to stay put and keep their eye out open for snipers. I began to crawl forward, trying to find out the beaten path the tanks had made, and at the same time to avoid heavy drifts of snow. All the while I was looking into the trees to see if I could spot a sniper. As I moved ahead, crawling slowly, and looking around me, at best I could see I had an eerie feeling that something happened to Finke. He would have contacted me now directly, either by returning or signaling in some other way that he was all right. I had crawled about 100 yards when I spotted Finke lying very still in the pathway. There was snow-lying scrub brush and that could give me some cover as I made my way toward him. He had not moved for the time I had first seen him. He was face down, his legs folded beneath him. When I reached him, I knew he was dead. There was a single hole in his right temple just below his steel helmet, which was the habit of tilting at an angle. He was killed instantly. I was afraid I was going to get sick. I had never seen a person shot before, and it upset me all the more that was a close friend. The shot rang out around, kicked up in the snow to my left. I hurried to grab Finke's M1 and his bandolier of armor and skirted into the brush. Another shot hit the snow behind me. I thought I'd spotted a sniper in a tall evergreen 50 yards to my front. He was camouflaged all in white, but since the tall evergreen was perched at evergreen, it was somewhat discernible. I picked up my broken twig and held it to my left, watching the tree as I did. I saw the muzzle of his flash. I saw the muzzle of a flash of a rifle, and I could see the sniper sitting crouched on several branches. I opened up with Finke's rifle and emptied an entire clip at the figure. He reeled back and tumbled out of his hideaway, hitting the ground. Hitting the ground. Hitting the ground with a thud. I waited a few seconds, and since he did not move, I crawled over to his still body. He was dead. I hit him 4 rounds to his neck and head, and for a split second, I was elated for avenging Finke's death. Thinking there were more snipers around, I quickly jerked one of the Finke's dog tags from around his neck and placed his steel helmet onto a large branch, which I jammed in the snow beside him. Returning to the squad, I was told them what happened, and I cautioned them about snipers.
Was that at night? Last night?
Yeah, I believe so. This time they took me more seriously. It was dark and I felt uneasy as we tried to find our way back out of the snow-covered maze. I lost my sense of direction. In all confusion, I tried to calm down and collect my thoughts and think my next move should be to get us back to our lines. I did not have much time to think about Finke's death, which in a way was a godsend. I felt terrible about it, and I supposed in normal times I would laminate it, but there was no normal times, and I had the reality of 10 men depending on me for their lives. I kept thinking there were more snipers around, and worse yet, there was always a possible danger of an ambush. I was confused, and Leip's whining did not help matters. He was complaining about carrying the tripod too long, and I told Williams, one of the ammo bearers, to carry it for a while. I still carried the receiver and really relinquished it into another ammo bearer, freeing me up to probe the area and try to work out a plan of action in my mind. I tried to impress upon the squad not to make any noise and to be quiet as possible. I decided to follow the road, but to stay in the tree line and keep the road in sight. We had probably walked several miles where I left Finke, and I was getting anxious and not seeing any friendly troops. I was a little ahead of the column. As I followed a short bend in the road, I stopped short. Up ahead, hidden in the evergreens and completely off the road were 2 Tiger tanks. Their engines shut down and several tankers working on them. They were very quiet, and as they went about their task of making repairs, their voices barely audible. Immediately I thought of the German infantry protecting their tanks as I lay on my stomach watching them working and talking silently. I could see no support troops, but they did not mean much. They could be up in trees or dug in. I turned and crawled away from them, hoping that I could intercept the squad before they came upon them. Lucky I reached them before they made the bend in the road and told them stay down and listen what I had to say. I told them briefly there were 2 Tiger tanks ahead and I didn't know if they had any support troops with them. I said our best option was to skirt them wildly, being as quiet as possible until we cleared them, and then getting back of the course along the road. Minutes?
14.
I would stay ahead and scout the immediate front, and Leip would back me up from bringing up the rest of the squad on my signal. In essence, we'd leapfrog ahead, and without any luck, bypass them completely. They understood, and I again cautioned them, no noise, whatever. That meant no talking. With Leip a short distance behind me, I started out. With Leip short distance behind me, I started out to make a wide circle around the Tigers. The rest of the squad followed up, always keeping Leip in view. We continued in this fashion for a distance, then we reversed the circle and headed back toward the road. Everything seemed quiet ahead, but I was tense and expected a shot to ring out at any moment. I was cold and hungry, and my lips and throat were dry and parched. I had run out of water earlier this afternoon, and I would crouch down to listen. I would just take a handful of snow and attempt to wet my lips and throat. I saw the road once again, and the trees, and motioned Leip to get down here and stay in position. He relayed some message to the rest of the squad. I rested a moment, taking some snow in my mouth and letting it melt. The back of my shirt was soaked, and I was perspiring ferociously while I trudged through the snow. I knew that I had to change before long, except for freezing to death. The rest of the squad was in the same predicament, and we had to find some shelter quickly. I motioned to Leip that we're moving on. As I stood up, I could still feel the water in my boots. The galoshes were like giant scoops, shoveling the snow into the tops of my shoes and finally melting as they hit the temperature in my body. I turned to look at the rest of the squad to see how they're doing, and it was not very encouraging. They appeared somber and fagged out. I had to get them into some kind of shelter or risk losing some of them. We had followed the road for a while, and we came to a rising road. I motioned to Leip to hold up the squad until I looked around. As we came over the rise, I spotted a farmhouse down in a valley besides the shoulder of the road. I did not see any smoke coming from the chimney, nor did I see any signs of people moving about. I motioned to Leip to join me. I told him to keep the squad here until I gave him the signal to come up. I would reconnect the farmhouse and hope we might get lucky and utilize it for our shelter for that night. I used a stone fence for cover to reach the back of the house. I still not to see any signs of life or even any farm animals moving. I peered through the broken window and it seemed deserted inside. It was then I spotted a large gaping hole in the side of the building. It looked like a large shell had penetrated it upon further observation. I could see the inside of the house completely shattered and another large hole the opposite of the house. I then turned my attention to the barn and it looked intact. I reached the wide double door, pushed it open gently. It squeaked loudly, thinking that someone would hear me and sent a chill up my sweating back. I entered a large barn and I could see that it had been used once for storage of farm vehicles and equipment. Over to one side area was piled high with hay, and I was overjoyed at the sight, and upon further looking about it, I was satisfied that there was no one
I'm gonna fall off this chair. Shit.
help him. What do you do to help him?
John, do you want to sit back on your chair a little better?
No, wait.
I went back outside, or I had left late. I told him to bring the
Damn
rest
it.
of the squad up. They followed me into the barn, and they saw the mounds of hay and just collapsed onto them. It was then I cautioned them to be as quiet as possible, no fires, and to change their socks and fill their boots with straw to help dry them out.
Yeah, damn it, I'm gonna fall off this fucking chair.
All right.
Shit.
Yep.
I'm gonna help him.
Shit.
Okay.
Shit.
I took a bunch of straw and set it close to the door. I did not want to stay outside. It was getting bitter.
What are you reading from, Dave?
Church service in the Bulge.
It's in the book?
Yeah, chapter 10.
Oh.
I took a bunch of straw and set it closer to the door. I did not want to stay outside. It was getting bitter cold, and I figured I could hear anyone approaching. Before I saw him, I took off my boots and wet socks. It felt good to shed the wet clothing and put on dry ones. I also changed my long sleeve undershirt and finally stretched out in the warm straw. Hoping I would not fall asleep, I opened a K-ration breakfast and started to gulp it down in its contents. As I lay there, I thought of how strange it might be laying in an unknown barn, miles away from anywhere. Then I thought Finke, lying out in the woods, covered with snow. No one would know who he was outside of remaining dog tags. He was just another dead GI, and I felt bad about his death and somehow wished that I had not done more for him when we were together. This was my first experience in losing a dear friend, and it affected me greatly. I then thought of a German I had killed. Who was he? Someone, someplace, would also grieve for him and not see him again in his lifetime. I also thought of my actions in taking his life. I could still see him lying there, not too far from Finke was lying. All his face to
Who's lying there?
what?
The German.
The German that shot Finke. Finke was lying, his face all distorted in pain and anguish. I had entered his life a split-second revenge and taken Finke's life, also in desperation to save my own minutes.
6.
Where else would I have resorted to anger and frustration to remedy an injustice or right a wrongdoing? It was then, as I lay all the warm and half asleep, I recalled, as I looked upon the dead German, fleeting glimpse of my dead father lying on a marble slab in the morgue of the hospital that fateful night in October. Perhaps this was the second person whose life I'd taken away, and one indirectly and the other more directly and traumatically. I caught myself napping, and I decided to stand up and walk about since there was no windows in the barn. I walked back to where the squad was, and they're all sound asleep. It'd be a shame to waken them for guard duty, since they're all relatively safe as long as no one spotted us. I was to take the rest of the night and catnap near the door entrance. I rolled a tractor against the door to secure it in the thought that I would certainly hear someone trying to enter. I went back to the pile of straw and felt warm and comfortable. Within a minute I was sound asleep, and I must have slept for several hours. When I felt someone shaking me, it was Lape, wanting to know if I wanted him to relieve me. I looked at my watch. It was 4:30 hours. It would soon be light. I told him to get back and lay down for another hour or so, then we'd be moving out. I felt refreshed and opened another K-ration, wishing I had something to drink. I lay there for another hour, thinking about Finke and then Jean and then Ann, all the things I thought of the furnace in the basement at home and how warm it felt to be near it. I got my things together, went back to wake the squad. Some are already up, just lying there enjoying the warmth of the straw, and be perfectly content to stay another day here. After getting them up and storing all their gear, we rolled back the tractor from the door and stepped outside. It was still dark and bitter cold, and a gust of winds was along with the whirling snow. I motioned them back in the woods to follow the road once again. I made sure I had not turned myself around. I was headed in the direction we had just come from that night. After making sure I was correct, we proceeded along the tree line, following the road. Minutes?
3. How would you know which way you were going, John?
Compass.
Oh. And did you have a map?
Huh?
Did you guys have a map?
You got a map, yeah.
How much minutes?
3.
You didn't know where you go if you didn't have a map with a compass.
By now the sun was out, but it's still bitterly cold and blustery. I wrapped a wool scarf around my mouth and nose to shelter my face. We must have walked several miles past the barn we had stayed at and when we came upon a small village. As we approached it, staying well into the trees to avoid detection, I noticed several takes around the houses. Creeping closer, we found that they were Americans from the 3rd Armored. Thinking they might be tanks captured by Germans, we looked for further verification that they're really Americans occupying them. Sure enough, there were GIs about, and we crossed open field to join them. I talked with a CO, after which he offered us some hot chow and a warm place to rest up. He said he would try to get in touch with our outfit and find out what our orders were. In the meantime, he stayed to get warm, get some dry clothes on, and take it easy.
So did they have extra dry clothes there for you?
Huh?
Did they have extra dry clothes there for you, or did you bring your own?
What?
Clothes, dry clothes.
They didn't bring it on. Anything you had in the Jeep you brought with you.
Okay.
They didn't bring them. Who's going to bring them up?
Well, yeah, okay.
A lot of times we washed the clothes in gasoline.
Yeah.
I thanked him and went over to the fireplace and sat on a discarded ammo box. The rest of the squad joined me in a cozy fireplace. We were not too much in a talkative mood, but only wanted someplace that was warm. We were told by the company was bivouac just north of here, and that we could hitch a ride on a 6x6 going back that way. Minutes?
1 minute, 26 seconds.
We pulled into our bivouac area and our summered to the Captain Droulard, wanted to know what happened. When I mentioned to him we lost Finke, he did not seem too concerned, and he did not ask for details. He reluctantly took Finke's dog tag, not asking if we had eaten anything or needed dry clothes. He stated that the company is pulling out shortly. With that, he turned and left me standing there.
I had 15 dog tags in my hand.
Wow.
15 dog tags.
Wow.
Wow.
I went back to the squad and informed them that we're pulling out. They were to get their stuff together and made sure they had a full canteen of water. Sergeant Whalen stopped by and said that he was sorry to hear about Finke and that would take over the squad. He also stated that would continue using Finke's M1 to pick up some ammo at the supply truck. Soon the artillery started to move out, the prime movers dragging their howitzers behind them. Time?
Yeah, 22 seconds. What's a howitzer?
Huh?
Howitzer.
What's a howitzer?
It's a cannon.
Okay.
Wow.
Time?
That was a rough time. Yeah. 8
What are you going to
seconds.
do?
Well, we're just wrapping it up for today. And then we're gonna watch the news.
Huh?